Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and welcome to my astrology channel. If you're a regular, then you'll know that I look at the week ahead. I see what alignments are interesting to talk about or what changes of sign for different planets are coming up. And then I talk about it in reference to world events, global events, and also us personally, as I will be doing this week. In fact, this week, I'm going to be focusing on the sign of Aquarius and the planet Uranus. And the reason for this is that the sun enters the sign of Aquarius on Monday, and on Friday, it forms a new moon. There will be a new moon in Aquarius. And both these things, it's not just the sun in Aquarius and new moon in Aquarius, but they are squaring or angling planet Uranus 90 degrees. And that's it's an angle of, well, we call it an angle of tension, but what it really means is that it gets exciting. Something's definitely going to happen. Now, one of the other things that's happening this week, and it is to do with that new moon in Aquarius, it's the Chinese New Year. And the Chinese New Year begins on the second new moon after the winter solstice, which usually falls around about the 20th, 21st of December. So, of course, almost always the new moon, or the second new moon after the solstice, is in Aquarius. And although I know nothing whatsoever about Chinese astrology, I do know that it is the year of the rat. And the other thing I know is that I'm a dog and I'm married to a pig. But enough about me. And let's get on with Aquarius. Let's have a really good look at this sign. Now, there's a lot of misunderstanding about the sign of Aquarius, mainly because of its name, the water bearer. Now, people do tend to think that the water that's coming out of the urn that Aquarius carries on his shoulder, well, it appears to be water, but it's not water. It's actually ether. It's the food of the gods almost, but it comes from the realm of the gods. And when we look at Aquarius and we think about Aquarius in terms of astrology, it is an air sign, and all the air signs are comfortable at home in the realm of the mind. And this is rather a nice depiction, I think, of the constellation Aquarius. It's above the horizon, and we see the shape of the man with the urn over his shoulder. And as you know, astrology or the Western zodiac doesn't chime with the constellations. It's a sort of man-made device. We divide that circle up, mathematically, so to speak. But it's still nice to know where the constellations lie and what they look like. Okay, so I'm going to stop share and come back to you. Now, the reason why, it's not the only reason that Aquarius is a misunderstood sign, because of this idea of the water being a water sign and therefore the realm of feelings, when in fact it's in the realm of the mind. But it's also got two ruling planets. It's ruled by both Saturn and Uranus, and these two planets couldn't be more different. Saturn is rather sober and reactionary and conservative, and of course Uranus is the wild child of the planets, if you like. It's rather reckless and groundbreaking. So you can imagine a sign of the zodiac that has these two different rulers is a complex sign. And indeed, there are two kind of different Aquarians. Now, I'll come back to that in a minute because I want to also talk about why there are two rulers. Now, up until 1781, Saturn was the limits of the solar system. That's as far as astronomers and astrologers thought that that our solar system existed. Saturn was the end of it. And this, in a way, is why Saturn represents boundaries, the limits of, there's nothing beyond that. That's where the boundary is. But of course, Uranus was discovered 1781, and it blew everybody's mind because there were planets beyond Saturn. And this idea that as soon as you get beyond Saturn, you're into the realm of the outer planets, because after Uranus, we discovered Neptune and Pluto and Aries and, well, that whole bunch of planetary dwarfs now. But it, of course, our expanded view of the solar system really resonates with our growing understanding and our expansion in terms of consciousness and awareness of our world, if you like, and the universe. Now, at the time that Uranus was discovered, 1781, there were a lot of revolutions going on. The Industrial Revolution was changing everything. Nobody worked on the land anymore. Here we were into machinery, and everything changed. Finance changed, class system changed. We got the rise of the merchant class. So it was a real breaker of codes one way or the other. But also at that time, revolutions like the American Revolution and the French Revolution. And that's, people getting fed up with the status quo and wanting to overthrow it. And that really is a really important aspect of planet Uranus and Aquarius. So I mentioned that there were a sort of two different kinds of Aquarians, and that's because of this different rulership. You will get your more kind of conservative Aquarian who really is quite opinionated and is concerned about form, and you've got the other kind of Aquarian who's more bohemian and free-spirited, along with the spirit of Uranus, if you like. But every Aquarian has both these aspects within them. And you may be able to recognize this in the Aquarians. You know that even if the main part of the Aquarians, is a sort of traditional and someone who is really concerned about rules and how things are put together in a very structured way, you'll know that within that person is a kind of quirky side, something that's a little bohemian. And that also has to do with the planet itself, that quirky side. Because Uranus, in terms of the kind of planet it is not like the other planets. Yes, it's a gas giant, but it lies on its side, as it were, as it's going around or it's orbiting the sun. Its north and south pole, as it were, is actually it's actually where the equator should be. So this really kind of crazy way of rocking around the sun. And again, that sort of plays into our understanding of the planet Uranus. Now, if you're an astrology buff, or you'd like to be, what I'm going to show you now is the image of Uranus that we use when we're putting Uranus in a horoscope. And as you can see, I'm not going to take you through all the symbolism here. Don't want to get all caught up in that too much. But if you'll notice, it looks like an old-fashioned television aerial. And in a way, that also helps us to understand the planet Uranus and also the Aquarian itself, attuned to a higher vibration, we might say. Okay, so I'm going to come back here and get back into where I am. So, okay, there we are. And let's get back into our recording. I'm not very good at technology. You can sort of tell I've got absolutely no Aquarius in my chart anyway, but very good at it, although I do have a strong Uranus. Now, words that I like to use for Uranus in particular is not just rebellious and revolutionary, but I like awakenings and diversity. I think they're good words to put with planet Uranus. And I also like to see Uranus as the higher self as well. And there's two reasons for this. In terms of octaves, which is like a higher vibration, Uranus is the higher octave of the sun. And of course, the sun is the self. But also what's interesting is that Leo is the opposite sign of Aquarius. And if Leo is the sign of the self, very identified with creation and creativity, then Uranus is with the higher self. And so I think that also gives us quite a kind of sense of Uranus in quite a rounded terms. Yes, it's all about change and diversity, awakenings, rebellions, revolutions, but in many ways, it does take us to a sort of higher level. Now, the week ahead puts Aquarius and Uranus at full throttle. So I think we can expect a week of shocks and surprises, maybe protests and rebellions as well. But I also want to look rather specifically at Meghan and Harry, who I've been talking about for the past couple of weeks, because if you remember, I talked last week about Uranus being a prime mover in their astrological story, is being present in the key kind of events in their life. And one of the things that I looked at was the idea that the relationship itself is a strongly Uranian kind of chart, and that really displays itself very well with this couple. Now, next week, as it has Uranus and it's squaring the new moon, we can expect this to be a really important week for Meghan and Harry. And on two levels, what can we expect? Can we expect Uranus to release them to their independent life? Or will Uranus scupper their plans and cause a lot of problems with their trying to get aboard their new life? Now, in terms of us as individuals, when we look at this Aquarius Uranian theme that's happening next week, I would say that it's a good idea to start afresh somewhere, make a new start somewhere, open a new chapter. It can be anything in terms of your life when you look at it. What's stale? What things aren't you doing? What could you begin? Because you'll get a real boost from that Aquarius, Uranus influence. And we need a boost when we need a rocket launcher, don't we, when we start something? And that's what we've got. Now, of course, a new start may be thrust upon you because something will happen, and you'll be, one avenue will be blocked to you, and you're going to have to think of something new. So it may be foisted upon you. Which brings to mind a very important point that I want to make about planet Uranus, and that is something called the Uranus opposition. Now, if you're interested in astrology and you've done a bit of studying, you'll already know about the Uranus opposition. But if you're a complete newbie and you know nothing, you're just interested in sun signs, then this is going to really mystify you. But what it means is that Uranus has come halfway round your birth chart. It's opposing its natal position, and this is a really key time. And if you think about the key words that I've used, revolution, diversity, change, awakenings, then that's what this time is all about. And if you were born in 1976 or 1977, then you are at that time. You are at your Uranus opposition. And it may seem as though a lot of things are breaking down. Maybe you've got relationships breaking down, jobs breaking down, families breaking down, maybe even you're breaking down. But what it means is that there is change coming, and that a new avenue of life, a new route is opening up, and you need to be different. There need to be different, more appropriate things in your life. And I think if you can look at these things, these events which may be happening out of your control, and see them as groundbreaking and opening up new territory for you, awakening something within you that needs to be awakened, it really puts a very positive spin on what's happening to you. Now, next week, in terms of, general things, Uranus has a lot to do with electricity. It has a lot to do with technology, the internet, those kind of things. And so we may also want to make sure we're being very careful with anything that's electronic. We don't want to press a button we're not sure about. We don't want to rely on the fact that something's making a funny noise. Go check it out. And as much as we can think of breakthroughs in technology and maybe getting new appliances, it would be a great time for a company to launch a new computer game, for instance, or for a new iPhone or something to be launched. it's just as easy for computer viruses to be released, and also for other kinds of software problems, whether they're in airports and the road system or what it may be. So those are the things we have to be a little on our guard with. So let me wrap up. What I really want to say as I end this video is that I'm actually looking forward to next week. It's really a change in the astrological dynamics, and that's really important. We've spent the last 4 weeks or so really in Saturn-Pluto land, and it's been really heavy, and a lot of people have found things very, very difficult. And of course, we've had a lot of very powerful things happen out there on the world stage. But what we have now is a change in the dynamic, and it's refreshing. It's allowing us to smell the coffee and to feel that we are embarking on a kind of new phase. And I'm reminded of this in particular because a couple of years ago, at this time of the year, I was in Churchanese. That's how you pronounce it. It actually begins with a K. You'd want to say Kirkenese, but it was Churchanese. It's north of the Arctic Circle, and it's on the border between Norway, Finland, and Russia. So it's very cold and very northerly. And our guide was explaining to us all that around the 17th of January, there's a celebration. Everyone in the villages and the towns gathers at the sort of south of the mountain that you could see, because the first rays of the sun start to appear just above the mountain. And if you're anything like me, I'm a spring bunny. I don't like the dark nights and I don't like the dark mornings. And it's around this time of year you start to notice that the days are getting a little bit longer. There's a little bit more light. And as you get up in the morning, it's a little lighter than it was before. And that brings me round to thinking about hope, light and hope. And I hope that we get some light this week in every sense of the phrase. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to being here this time next week. Take care.